Hello guys and welcome back to PlayFaeria.com's Deck Doctor episode number 3. And today we're going to be covering a very powerful deck in the metagame known as Monoblue. Now this is a very expensive deck to craft, as you can see there's a lot of legendaries, but it is a very rewarding deck. So if you're looking for a deck that rewards intricate decisions, you will love this deck because you get the most out of this deck based on how well you play. So this deck is a little bit more difficult to pilot than the other ones I've posted up so far. So it's going to take a bit of practice. But once you get really deep into Monoblue, you can start changing this list to kind of suit your play style. There's a lot of different ways you can build Monoblue. And this deck is very good at controlling Faeria wells. It's very similar to mid-red in a way, but you control the board a bit differently. You rely on creature combat. Being able to transform your creatures with Mirror Phantasm and Unbound Evolution to gain stats advantages, but also using Royal Judge and Triton's Banquet to gain that protection buff and that mobility. So let's get into the deck and take a look at the creatures. Alright, to start things off, we have Farm Boy, a 1 Faeria 1/1. Now, this is a great Gatherer, but also has great synergies with Mirror Phantasm. Being able to turn a 1/1 into a 5/5 is really powerful, and this gives you a lot of ways you can fight on board and at the wells. You know, this little 1/1 can actually become a big threat because of some of the cards Monoblue has access to. Spring Mochi is a cheap Gatherer, but also has the additional gift effect of reducing the cost of your 7 or higher cost cards. So this affects Phantasm, Windfall, Garudan, and Beirut. So there's a lot of cards that you'll hit with a Mochi, making you have more Faeria to use because of the reduction, but also can be Phantasms as well. So this 2/2 can also turn into a 5/5, so it has great synergy with that card. Lore Thief gives you card draw, synergizes very well with Spring Mochi. If you have both of these cards, you want to play a Mochi first and then draw the cards so you can get the gift effect of the Mochi. And reduce windfalls and stuff like that are always awesome to use. But yeah, just some additional card draw. You can even use the stats as well. I don't see a lot of players doing it, but again, this is another card that can be transformed with Mirror Phantasm. Gabrian Archon is one of the key cards in this deck. You know, just a 4/4 for 4 Faeria with charge 2 is pretty decent. But when you combine its other effect, which is very easy to pull off because you'll be using Mirror Phantasms and Windfalls quite regularly in this deck, a 6/6 for 4 Faeria with charge 2 is absolutely fantastic. So one of the best stat-lined creatures for 4 Faeria in the game right now. Royal Judge is a utility card. It's a Gatherer. It has a Safeguard, which will allow you to fight on board easier, keeping your creature's health intact, but also gives you some form of damage-based removal. It gives you access as punishment, so you can punish your opponent's Faeria Gatherers or any neutral cards that they might be running. But one of the other things about Royal Judge is that Unbound Evolution works very well with him. You can transform him into a 7 cost, and of course you also have that synergy with Phantasm. And all the cards that I've talked about so far have had something to do with this card, Mirror Phantasm. Probably one of the most powerful cards in the game right now. You can transform another creature into a 5/5. So like I said, you can transform these small little Gatherers into real threats. But one of the other benefits of this card is that you can transform your enemy's creatures into 5/5s. Now, Blue doesn't have a very good way of removing cards other than the punishment I described from Royal Judge. So what Blue relies on is transforming your opponent's threats into other creatures using either Phantasm or Unbound Evolution. So if your opponent is playing, I don't know, Green Arrow Sack and has a 15/15 Soul Eater, it's going to be hard to take that out sometimes. So keeping hold of cards like Mirror Phantasm against decks that run these big creatures is really good because you can just transform them into 5/5s, which is much easier to manage. So let's move on to the event cards next. So to start things off, we have Unbound Evolution, one of the most powerful kind of high variance cards in the game right now. Unbound Evolution has a lot of uses. Its first use is to transform one of your own creatures into something bigger. It goes up 2 costs higher. So usually if you transform, say, the Royal Judge, you're going to get something better than 1/1. But also, another way you can use this is to replenish the health of creatures that have already in combat. So say your Gabriel's Archon is currently a 4/1 after fighting something on board, you can just unbound it into something else. And being a 4 cost, it could even turn into a Virgin Force, which is a 7/7. So a very powerful card. It has same uses as Mirror Phantasm, in you can transform your enemy's threats into other creatures. So again, the example I use, a big Soul Eater, 15/15, transform him and with Unbound Evolution into a 7 cost, which is going to be much easier to manage than the high stats that Soul Eater has gained during the course of the fight. The next card up is Battletoads, 4 Faeria for 2/2s that have jump, so you get 2 cheap creatures with a lot of mobility with the jump mechanic, which can gather Faeria for you. But that mobility is also great for when you want to take your opposing creatures out, because you can jump onto a tile and then transform them into 5/5s with Phantasm. So it gives these toads a lot of reach and has a lot of synergy with the deck in general. Triton's Banquet is one of the best cards in the game as well, I believe. +1/+1 protection and jump. So not only do you gain additional stats, you gain the protection buff and you gain mobility. And this is an incredibly powerful card which will allow you to clear your opponent's threats without losing your own creatures in the process, and they gain additional stats. And finally, Windfall is a 9 Faeria card which gives you 12 Faeria. This synergizes with the Gabriel Archon and with the Spring Mochi, so it can have a cost reduction through her battle cry, buffs up your 4/4s to 6/6s, but also gives you that little bit of extra Faeria to work with. So last but not least, let's talk about the real expensive cards in this deck. Let's talk about the legendary cards. So on my stream, I get asked a lot, what legendary should I craft? And there are 4 standard legendaries in this game, which I think all collections should try and get. And 3 of them are in this deck right now. So let's talk about the one that isn't here, which is Kaleem, a very strong yellow creature, which I've talked about in my Yellow Archers deck guide. But these 3 are fantastic. So let's start off with Aurora. Aurora is a 4 Faeria 1/1 that transforms your creature into a 6/6. This is absolutely amazing card because you get a 6/6. You can transform one of the small Faeria gatherers, which I talked about earlier, into that big body. You can replenish life of other creatures, but also another synergy this deck has is Unbound Evolution turns Aurora into a real threat, and the 4 Faeria to 6 Faeria jump with Unbound Evolution is one of the stronger jumps. You can turn Aurora into a Virgin Force, for example. So Aurora is very powerful in blue, very powerful in any deck really that can use blue, but it has great synergies in this deck specifically. And moving on is another legendary I think everyone should craft. It's Beirut, one of the stronger 8 Faeria cards in the game. It has an incredible stat line of 8/10. It's aquatic, so it can only move on lake tiles, but every turn when you produce 3 Faeria, it turns all adjacent tiles into lakes. Now this is crazy powerful because 1, it gives itself tiles to move on. 2, you can transform your opponent's tiles into lakes. So if your opponents are playing 3 wishes, for example, you can take out key lands to stop them playing 3 wishes. And this applies to all decks really. If you can turn their deserts, their mountains, whatever, into lakes, they're going to have to start building more lands to play their cards. But if they can't answer Beirut, Beirut is going to continue destroying that land. And I say destroy loosely, turn them into lakes. If your opponent's not playing blue, that's pretty much destroying their land. So yeah, this card is fantastic, especially against red, because they don't have hard removal. They're going to have to throw damage at this thing, and it has 10 health. Last but not least, we call this Monoblue, but there's one red card that can make its way into this deck, and that is Garadan. The one thing that blue really lacks is damage-based removal. So we have Royal Judges in to help with that. But Garadan is AoE. It's area of effect removal. It affects the entire board. And Garadan is great in this metagame because a lot of players are playing blue, and we've seen the stat lines of the blue creatures that this deck runs. Yellow Archers has become popular, so Garadan just wipes out a lot of Yellow Archers creatures, and also can have a great effect against red against fire elementals, outland rangers, and unbuffed axe grinders. So Garadan just feels really good in this deck at the moment. It can be taken out, you don't have to play him, but just keep in mind that you're going to have to develop mountains to use him. So yeah, they're the 3 legendaries in the deck. Let's go over to the mulligans. So Monoblue is one of the more difficult decks to mulligan for, because you need to pick cards to best suit what types of opponents you're expecting to play. It's like I said, it's quite a hard deck to pilot, but these are the cards that I would probably go for mulligan when it comes to a mulligan. You want early Faeria gatherers, that's going to be very important. So they should be your priorities, and as you can see here, we've listed some of the better early Faeria gatherers like Farm Boy and Battletoads. Aurora is great with these earlier Faeria gatherers because if your opponent's playing an aggressive deck or they're trying to compete for a well, you can transform it into a 6/6 and you can fight off there. And the same applies to Mirror Phantasm. The last 2 cards in this mulligan list are kind of luxury cards. If you have an early Faeria gatherer or 2, I think you can keep hold of Phantasm or Windfall because you have your gatherers and you're going to be able to utilize those cards in about 2-3 turns. You can keep, say, Beirut if you're going up against 3 Wishes, if you know your opponent's playing that, because you know Beirut is going to be able to shut down that deck really well. So it's all about analyzing what your opponent's going to play. So if you run into the same people on ladder, you can kind of adjust your mulligans to what you expect them to bring. But yeah, that's it for the mulligan. Let's move on to land placement. So when it comes to Monoblue, you want to control the wells. You want to contest the wells that your opponents are going for first, and then you want to move on to the other well to start quad collecting. Now, the beauty of blue is you have a lot of mobility with your Battletoads and your Gabrian Archons, your Triton Banquet as well, so you have ways to jump to wells pretty easily. So I would recommend you start off with a couple of lakes in your opener, one straight in the middle, and then start to produce some lakes towards your first well. And then you can start using double neutrals, and double neutrals give you that reach you'll need for your Battletoads or your banqueted creatures to get the places they need to go to remove threats or to collect Faeria. So, yep, just starve your opponents of Faeria, very much like mid-red, control the wells, and eventually make a big push towards the end with stuff like Beirut, or just like a couple of Phantasms. Phantasms are great aggressive creatures. They have a lot of flexibility. You can use them defensively, you can use them aggressively. So yeah, they're going to be leading the charge to finish the game for you. But yeah, just build around the wells, control those wells, remove your opponent's threats, and then go for the win. Alright, before we wrap things up, let's take a look at a budget version of this deck. As I said at the start of this guide, this deck is quite expensive, packs a lot of legendaries, packs a lot of epics, but there are budget variations you can build, and I've put a list here instead of listing the cards like I did in my previous video. So let's take a look at some of the replacements in this list. You have Falcon Dive to replace the Royal Judges, so it's just some cheap damage-based removal. That was Royal Judges, one of Royal Judges' jobs, providing that luxury. So Falcon Dive is just a cheaper way to do it. Instead of Unbound Evolutions, which are epics, I put Prophets of the Tides, which synergize with the Wave Crash Colossus, which will be replacing Beirut, Garadan, and Aurora. So Wave Crash Colossus gets buffed, gets its Faeria reduced when you harvest your opponent's wells. So Prophets of the Tide will help you with that. The Mirror Phantasm is probably the only card from Monoblue you can't replace. It's just so powerful and a core part of Blue's game plan. The rest of the cards in this deck are rare or lower, so this is a cheaper version. You'll just have to adapt your game plan to harvest in your opponent's wells just to get those cheaper Wave Crash Colossus. So that's it for Deck Doctor Episode 3 covering Monoblue. This was a 3-part special for this week to introduce the series to newer players and get them up to speed with the top meta decks. Next week I'll be starting one Deck Doctor per week, covering some of these kind of second tier decks and decks that I've been experimenting with. I've been listening to your feedback as well, and some players have been saying they'd like to see some gameplay footage. Now I have some gameplay footage already available for mid-red in some of the ESL matches. Yellow archers I don't have any of yet. So what I'm going to do to accompany this series of Deck Doctor, I'm going to be doing another series called Deck Pilot, where I play through a match with the deck and talk about my decision making and some of the decisions that you might want to consider when piloting the deck. So that will be coming next week. I'll be doing a deck pilot for mid-red, yellow archers, and mono blue, as well as a new episode of Deck Doctor with that deck pilot to follow it. So thank you very much for tuning into this video, and I hope this is helping you guys get in touch with the metagame with Faeria. And if you have any comments or feedback, just drop a comment below, or on playfaeria.com, or on Reddit, where I'm going to be posting this, and I will get back to you guys, or I'll just give you a thumbs up if you give me some great feedback. Be sure to check out our website, playfaeria.com, is where all our guides are featured, as well as articles and news all about Faeria. And of course, there's the social media networks on the side of me, which you can also follow. Thank you very much, guys. Hope to see you. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope to see you guys again. And I'll be back next week with some more Deck Doctor and Deck Pilot. Take care. Have a good day.